Hello, everyone. This is the start of my journey on my YouTube channel, Ver2, where I will ponder philosophical questions and answer questions that need to be answered. And you may have seen in my description that these will involve virtues of happiness that I will talk about throughout my channel in future videos, but today I'd like to focus on a different perspective, and that is a political perspective of a question that I came up with. And I'd like to literally paint a picture of explaining what I mean and with my arguments as well. So, first of all, the question that I came up with was why Biden's run for re-election was against his good nature. And you may be wondering what good nature even means, and I will get into that shortly. So, Joe Biden is or was the 46th president of the United States, and he served his first term in office from January 20, 2021, so 2021, until 2025, as we all know, because Donald Trump is now in office. So, at the start of his term, he was 78 years old, and at the end of his term, so 2025, he was 82 years old. Now, academic papers that have looked at the decline of mental activity with age report that at age 60, there are noticeable declinations in our mental state. It's interesting to note that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are the oldest presidents we've seen in a long time, and they are also the most recent. Before I can present any of my syllogisms, and if you don't know what a syllogism is, it's basically a structured argument that has one, two, three, four. So, yes, before I can present my syllogism, we first need to examine why Joe Biden was going against his good nature. So, Joe Biden was the President of the United States, and he has a very important job, as we all know. They manage this country's government, the people in this country, and engage in diplomacy with other countries. They're tasked with a plethora of difficult tasks during their presidency that they need to solve, and they need to have the mental capacity to do so. When Joe Biden was elected for his first term, he was already 78 years old. Mental deterioration was no doubt in effect. The president's job is also to be the spokesman or representative figure of our country, so he must put on a good enough act to show us that they are fit for office. His first term was not the best we've seen from a U.S. president by a long shot, but we should take into account that he had to deal with the difficulties of COVID-19. Could he have dealt with it better? Probably. Did his age have anything to do with his ability to serve this country in the best possible manner? Probably. However, this is not what I am most concerned with. I am more surprised by his decision to scourge himself by running for office a second time when he was already 82 years old. So, for context, Joe Biden runs 2021 and he gets elected president. Then at the end of his term is 2025. He's already 82 years old. And earlier I mentioned how mental deterioration occurs starting around age 60, right? So already we knew that Joe Biden was 78 years old at the start of 2021, and mental deterioration is said to have started around age 60 in most individuals, right? So he's already 70 years old, and we know that his first term is not the best term. And we do take into account that COVID-19 affected some of his ability, but knowing that, what, I guess you couldn't really know that COVID-19 was going to happen, so I'll just withhold my comment there. But the important part is when he is 82 years old, he runs for reelection. And we already know as citizens, we've seen his deterioration in action, stumbling on steps, not being quick to respond. Yes, he is a very knowledgeable individual, but if he's going to act like this as our representative of the country, then clearly he's not going to be the best representative, and yet he still runs again. And this also can be a problem of the Democratic Party not having a candidate, but I believe if Kamala ran instead first, then she may have had a better opportunity or chance. Anyways, let's get back to syllogisms. So, let's talk about nature. What do I mean by good nature? Well, to follow one's nature in Stoicism, Stoic principles, is to lead a life of virtue and not vice, to cast aside externals and to only focus on what we can control, the mind. Ultimately, the end goal of the Stoic doctrine is to find true happiness in ourselves. While not specifically scored in Stoic precepts, I also believe that we should try to avoid doing bad and to reach for the good, especially with concern to the populace at large. I can now present my following syllogism, and I'll draw it on here so that you can see what I mean. So first, to follow one's nature is to lead a life of virtue and not vice in Stoic principles. But if you don't believe in Stoicism, I believe that you can also see that this is true. So to follow one's nature, which is basically means to follow one's life in the best possible way to find happiness, you must lead a life of virtue, so doing good things and not doing bad things. I believe we all know that to be true. Now, second syllogism, or second argument in the syllogism. At the end of his first term, Biden was 82 years old and his mind was noticeably deteriorating. Right. If he ran again, he would knowingly serve another 4 years in worse shape than he already was. all the while acknowledging the fact that he could be making poor decisions because of his health. And just to add a little context to the first argument in the syllogism, to follow one's nature is to lead a life of virtue and not vice, but it is also to focus on what we can control and to cast aside externals, to avoid doing bad things and to promote good ones. Now, Joe Biden, at the end of his first term, was 82 years old and his mind was noticeably deteriorating. If he ran again, he would knowingly serve another 4 years in worse shape than he already was, all the while acknowledging the fact that he could be making poorer decisions because of his health. Already, you can see that maybe running again was not following his nature. And I'll paint that picture now. Number 3, pushing for another candidate sooner, like Kamala Harris, who was much younger, so less mental deterioration, and more passionate or more uh, what's a good word? Was much younger, more passionate, and I don't want to say vibrant because that's wrong, but more spirited. Sure. More spirited and more spirited would have been more beneficial towards the country as a whole. Why do we say this? Well, Kamala was, well, right now, Kamala Harris is 60 years old, and so during 2025, which is now, she would have been around 60 years old, which is when mental deterioration starts, but it's not as bad as being 22 years older than when mental deterioration starts, which Biden was. She was more passionate, so she was a better figure for the country and more spirited. And so we move on to number 4. The government itself vouched for Biden's good health, when he was clearly on the decline, forgetting that they cannot control externals. Biden even said himself, lying to himself, basically, that he was fit, that he was able. If not for the backlash about his health, he would have continued to run. And again, you may not agree with some Stoic principles, but I can explain why most people might agree with the Stoic principle that people cannot control externals, and that is for this important important truth that everybody should understand, at least I believe, is that yes, we cannot control externals, but why? And it is because what we think of as first, let's define externals. So externals refer to other people's actions and thoughts. Sorry for the bad handwriting. Now, you may say that we could influence these actions and thoughts, but we cannot control. Forgot the word control, which is very important. We cannot control externals. We cannot control these. And here, scroll down, Biden was trying to control externals, which was people's opinions of himself, by saying that he was healthy when he actually wasn't, and we all knew that he wasn't able. And finally, we can conclude this argument. To conclude, Biden was not following nature's good purpose when running for re-election. And we will end it there. So just to go over it again, Joe Biden, 46th President of the United States. When he started his first term, he was 78 years old. Then his first term lasted from 21 to 25. At the end of his first term, he was 82 years old, and he runs for re-election. We know that mental deterioration most likely starts around age 60, but I'm sure there's sources that say that it started even earlier than that. First, we go through the syllogism. So, number one, to follow one's nature is to lead a life of virtue and not vice and stoic principles, and also to cast aside externals. Number two, at the end of the first term, he was already 82 years old, which is past the age of mental deterioration by 22 years. If he ran again, he would knowingly serve another 4 years in worse shape than he already was, as we saw during his first term. Number three, pushing for another candidate sooner, like Kamala Harris, who was much more younger, more passionate, more spirited, would have been more beneficial towards the country as a whole, because especially for Democrats, if she ran straight at the get-go, she could have used more of the Democratic National Committee's money to kind of campaign for her election, and she could have won against Trump. Number four, the government itself and Biden vouched for his good health, which clearly was not true. He was lying to himself, so he cared about externals, which he should not have, since he cannot control what other people think of him. And So he should not have been lying to other people. To conclude, number 5, Biden was not following nature's good purpose when running for re-election. And I know this is kind of scattered everywhere and very raw for a first video, but I can promise that it will get better than this. And I'll actually have some good editing skills soon enough. So, thank you for watching and see you all soon.